So breath work, massively helpful. Why is it helpful? Okay, so a little bit of context. We have a nervous system. It does a lot of unconscious processes. We need it for everything in life. If you've been traumatized, you may find that your nervous system is functioning very much in survival mode, and that could look like living in the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. Just like a whole other video to explain what those look like. But as a general overview, for us living in the fight response, or fight flight, but we defaulted to different nervous system states when we felt threatened, and we felt threatened all the time. So we're living in a very irritable, exhausted way where we just go and go and go until we burnt out. I would need to be constantly busy, constantly working, never in a silence, never having time to think, constantly cleaning, constantly organising, planning. You, I think? Yeah, no guess as to which one I default to. I think I'd be really irritable, really combative. I felt like I had to be. I felt like everything everybody was saying was coming from a place of trying to attack me, because being in that state means that's how I'd read situations and people, even down to a neutral facial expression looking threatening to me and being read as that. And then the freeze response, you could find that you have a lot of racing thoughts and a lot of energy but no ability to really move or do anything about it. Could feel like moving through treacle. It could feel like really wanting to do something even as simple as reach for the water next to you and just being like, I just can't seem to reach for it, I just can't do these things. I want to do it, but I just can't. Or it could be, it's kind of on a spectrum. We've experienced like functional freeze as much as we've experienced like full catatonic response where I physically cannot move or speak. So it's different variations. And there's a lot more to all of them. I recommend looking into them. But as a general overview, it's kind of what it's like. And the thing is, what's happening is the sympathetic branch of our nervous system is online. And we need the parasympathetic branch of our nervous system to go into rest and digest. When you know, if you've been like processing a lot of shit and like feeling really agitated and really distressed, and then suddenly you're like calming down and you get really hungry, it's likely that your rest digest system just came online instead of your fight flight system. So the fight flight is governed by the sympathetic nervous system branch, and the rest digest is governed by the parasympathetic branch. Freeze does its own thing, which always confuses me every time, but I know it's part of the threat detection. It's just full shutdown instead of like trying to deal with the threat. Freeze is learning that there is no way to deal with it, so it's just collapse. We can stimulate our rest digest parasympathetic nervous system branch to come back online manually. There's a lot of ways we can do this. One way we can do it is breath work, and it works through stimulating the vagus nerve. So the vagus nerve kind of is like the control center. It governs these nervous system branches, and by stimulating it, you can help communicate safety to your body in a very physiological way, and that helps to get your rest and digest system back online. The vagus nerve runs kind of like down the back of our neck. I think it can be stimulated by things like, well, it can be stimulated by things like humming, singing, howling, and breath work, yeah. Cold exposure has also got some benefits. Sometimes if the back of our neck is really hurting and it's going to go into our migraine and we're very tense, we can ice the back of our neck where the vagus nerve is, and that can help prevent a migraine as well as doing breath work. So sometimes you don't notice if you live in like survival mode. If you've always lived there, it's really hard to notice because that's just normal. And for us, it was like that our whole lives until very recently. Last few months probably, that our default is changing. It still gets triggered really easily because it just will, because gestures broadly are trauma. But now we have the tools to be able to help to get our rest digest system back online. We can recognize when it's happening through having built more awareness, and we can come down out of it. So it's like about being able to communicate safety to your body on a very physical level. It's about being able to return to comfort, to soothing. It's about being able to calm yourself down essentially at a physical level. Because when you're in fight flight, one of the things that changes is you may take short, rapid breaths. It makes sense neurobiologically, you know, if you're preparing to run away or fight something, you know, if that makes sense. If you're in the freeze response, you may find that you're holding your breath or barely breathing. And we can reverse engineer it. So by changing our breathing, we can communicate a different state to our body. So this is why slow, deep inhales and longer exhales have a separate logic, but they're very important. So this is why you slow your breathing when you're doing this. It communicates that we're in a safe state, and it helps our body to adopt that same safe state. The same way that smiling can make you feel better, like as a biological feedback loop from your body. So then we know breaths want to be slow. It's very important to breathe out for longer than you're breathing in. I think the exact count can be amended so that it suits you. What we do, and what we've done for a long time now, last 8 months, 9 months, is breathe in for a count of 4 and out for a count of 6. The reason you need the exhale to be longer than the inhale is because the slight buildup of CO2 in the body is actually a chemical messenger that tells our body to disperse the oxygen into the cells where it needs to go. And if we don't have that slight buildup of CO2, our body doesn't get the message to disperse the oxygen. So before we knew any of this, we would have a lot of panic attacks. We still have panic attacks, but we can regulate them, and we can be with the sensations without feeling like, shit, I'm going to pass out, which is a genuine risk. We've had that happen before. Now it feels much more in our control. Panic attack doesn't mean helpless and all of these things. And what would happen is I would feel like I can't breathe, I'm lightheaded, I'm dizzy, my face is going numb. I need more oxygen. So I would be breathing in. And I would be breathing in more and more and being like, well, I'm getting enough oxygen. Why do I feel like I'm not getting enough oxygen? But the thing is, it's something called overbreathing, which is where you're breathing in enough oxygen, but it's not getting dispersed everywhere it needs to go, into the cells in your body, into your brain, into your blood, you know, everywhere it needs, because of that lack of buildup of CO2. So you need to exhale for longer than you inhale so that that buildup tells your body to actually disperse and utilize the oxygen you're taking in. Otherwise, you're taking it in, but it's not really getting used. So it's not that economical. So that's why the exhale has to be longer. And then the third thing is, I can't pronounce it, but there is a specific chemical which is released when you do nasal breathing, which helps to slow your heart rate. It's like acetylcholine, if I watch this back, I'll add it to the description, but it's a chemical that helps to slow your heart rate. And in slowing our breath, we can help to slow our heart rate. In slowing our heart rate, we can help to communicate safety to our body, to our nervous system, and we can get that rest digest system back online. So all of these things at a very neurobiological level help to communicate safety. Because there are times when we either go into flashbacks, we get triggered, we get traumatized, you know, a whole array of things that can happen with trauma. And we can give ourselves affirmations, and we can reassure ourselves mentally or even out loud, preferably out loud because more people can hear it, but we, like in here, obviously. But it doesn't feel like it goes deep enough in. It's like we can give ourselves the affirmations and we can do sensory grounding, but it feels almost like our brain can't take on the information. And that could very literally be happening, because if you're in fight, flight, freeze, you don't have full access to your prefrontal cortex. You can't rationalize, think clearly, and absorb information in the same way that you can when it's online. Doing breath work like this in a way that stimulates your vagus nerve helps to give you back more access to your prefrontal cortex. It helps to be able to think clearly again. It helps you to come down into a state that's calm and soothed. And it's like a muscle. So the more you practice doing this and returning to that state, the easier and the faster and the more effective it's going to be when you practice that. The thing is, you don't want to be competing against existing pathways because they've been built for longer. And like, imagine, you know, a river going through a valley that's been entrenched a lot longer, and when you're just starting to entrench a new one, you don't want it to be competing with the rushing water. So that's why it really helps to practice breath work at times when you're already feeling relaxed, you're already feeling safe, and out of context from when you're eventually going to use it when you get triggered, to help yourself to come into a state of safety and relaxation. But at first, it helps to build that neural pathway when you're not competing with an existing one. So breathwork is best to be practiced at a time when you feel relaxed, safe, comfortable, soothed, and then it'll help you to build that association to it as well. So I think that is all of the things that we've learned about breathwork and why it helps and why it's important and the things you have to do to make it function. So then in practice, that just looks like, so through the nose, slow breath, deep, but it doesn't have to be deep to the point of feeling forced. It wants to be comfortable. Slower exhale than inhale. So and repeating it for several minutes to really get the benefit. And as you do it, everything starts off unfamiliar, and unfamiliar can signal unsafety, so it can feel really uncomfortable. But the more you build it and the more you get used to it at a tolerable level for you, the easier it's going to get and the more naturally it's going to happen. For us, this happens on autopilot now. When something happens that makes us jump, we used to hold our breath. Now we find that we start doing breath work just as automatically as the holding of the breath used to be. So it builds over time. How easy it is to access builds over time. The effect you get from it builds over time. How comfortable it is to do it for longer builds over time. If you find it difficult to like sit down and just do this and not focus on anything, then you could maybe try putting on a video that guides you with the seconds, or maybe a piece of music that you find calming and just doing it to the end of the song. Or maybe you could go for a walk and do it at the same time. Maybe you could do some art and do some breath work with it. You know, find something that makes it accessible to you. There's no shame in making it easier to access. Things are hard enough. You're allowed to have an easy time whenever you can find one. Some potential barriers we faced. Well, the main one was the panic attacks because we were breathing in too much and not out enough, and we didn't realise why. And it made us feel afraid to try breathing because we were like, well, we could have a panic attack and pass out. So we've explained the longer exhale and why that's important. Another thing is, I think that some people have described, like, if you have breathing issues, then you may want to try to just play around with the count. As long as you're exhaling longer than you're inhaling, that's the main thing. So maybe you want to try to do it slower, not as deep, in different environments. Maybe make sure that you have is it a dehumidifier you want if you have asthma? Or a humidifier? Maybe try and find an environment or a temperature that's easier to breathe in. You know, don't be afraid to play around with things that make it more accessible to you. If it just feels really unsafe and uncomfortable, always listen to your body. Maybe search for different types of breath work, because there are different counts and there are different ways of breathing, and some people really get on with some and really don't get on with others. So there will be a way to find something that works for you. At some point, we're going to go over, there's like, neck yoga, and you combine that with your breath, and some people that struggled with breath work found it much easier to do it with combined movement. So that's an option as well. And I think the sensation can feel uncomfortable for some people, so shifting where you experience which sensation can help as that. Like, if it makes you feel panic to feel your stomach expanding and contracting, then maybe try and focus instead on like the rush of air as it goes through your throat and comes back out, the temperature as it goes down your throat and comes back out. If that doesn't feel safe, maybe try, if shifting your focus to your shoulders rising and falling. Maybe you try shifting your focus to the temperature of the air as it enters your nostrils and the slightly warmer air as it exits. If that doesn't feel safe, then maybe try visualizations combined. So you might want to imagine something like a balloon blowing up and coming down and blowing up and coming down. Maybe it helps you to keep counting out loud for the inhale of 4 and the exhale of 6, or whatever count suits you, as long as it's got similar parameters and you're not breathing too fast. Maybe it helps to have a visualization of something you need being breathed in, like a concept like peace, and maybe you could imagine it sitting in front of you with a color, with a texture, and breathing that in. And maybe you could imagine breathing out like smoke or something to indicate letting go of stress or whatever you want to let go of. There's a lot of things that you can try, and just don't be afraid to play around with it, because breathwork is one of the most helpful tools that we use every single day in processing trauma, in dealing with triggers, in regulating our nervous system, and it's so beneficial.